Yeah, that's the opening. That's the Japanese Imperial Army march on Nanking in celebration of all the just awful shit they did. My name is Mike Luck. This is Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast, the podcast. Pardon my absence recently. I just having a hard time just giving a shit. No. For those who suffer depression, probably know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's just hard to muster up the wherewithal to give a fuck about anything. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? No, also I have some kind of fungal infection on my scalp, and I don't know, it makes me just stop and think, like, what kind of disgusting pile of a human being I am to get a fungal infection on my head somehow. So I shaved my head. Nothing matters because I'm fucking going bald anyways. Just a real joy fest up inside my mind the last week. Plus, people in the house are sick. A lot of coughing going on, and just I don't know. It's rough to find a time to record and get everything together. So yeah, that's what's going on in my slice of the world. This is part 2 of the Occult Crime Atlas Japan. This is going to be a lighter episode compared to the last one. Not as much murder, death, etc. But there's still, some of that. This one's going to focus a little bit more on UFO related stuff, and also where we left off at the topic of what can best be described as for lack of a better word, grooming? The grooming, I guess you call it, of quote-unquote psychic children, gifted children. It's kind of like the Xavier Institute for Gifted Children, except of a criminal nature. There are CIA documents to back this up. GHQ, General MacArthur, when these guys were, during the occupation, there was a lot of, this was a real messed up time in history. The aftermath of 2 atomic bomb blasts. It's one of the things that really interests me about Japanese culture is that the complete 180 that culture took as a whole in the aftermath of the bombings. The human statement, I believe it's called, that Hirohito had to make on the radio, saying, I'm not a god, I'm a normal guy. Just the fact that something like this happened in the 1900s, that someone had to go on the radio and say, by the way, I'm not a god, just a regular guy. I don't know. It's all very surreal in the aftermath, Monday morning quarterbacking. But yeah, I don't know. It's a strange time, and it's not that long ago. So I don't know. Just the idea that we like to think that we're so evolved and sophisticated in our thought processes and belief systems, and this is practically yesterday on a long enough timeline. Before jumping in everything else, I also want to say to all my listeners, subscribers, man, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate you guys stopping by, hanging out, taking out time from your day, and all the possibilities of endless infotainment, I guess we'll call it. All the content that you have as a choice at your fingertips, and you choose to listen to me ramble on about various topics that I find interesting, and I guess that you do too, and that makes you my soul brother and sister number one. Yeah, just got 125. What do you call it? What's the word? It's got 125 followers on the YouTube channel. Man, that's awesome. Seeing as how, especially, I try not to use social media. I mean, obviously, YouTube is a form of social media, but I don't, advertise the show. I don't really go out of my way to boost anything. I rarely tell others that I have a podcast. So something myself and occasionally my homies get together and just do and have fun and just kind of is mostly for us, but you guys enjoy it too, and you listen in, and man, that is just, God, it feels great. It's a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and we all need more of those. So once again, I appreciate you guys just more than words can convey. Really, seriously, it makes me feel really good inside. Yeah, I don't know, and that's. 125 is far beyond my expectations when going into this. I didn't, YouTube is kind of an afterthought. I have my various issues with YouTube. I'm sure that I'm shadow banned or whatever in more ways than one. I don't know. I've made my complaints. I had a video taken down because of them, because we mentioned lasagna fence. I can't even say the word, yet somehow there's a video with the exact title of the word that I said, but somehow my video gets taken down. A struggling content creator with barely a base to speak of. It's odd. It's weird. I tried to contest it, and they said, no, we're in the right. But who am I to argue with the monolithic content provider that is YouTube? They know better than me, I guess. They're the billionaires. I'm not bitter. No, never. So yeah, that's what's going on, I guess. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Once again, I really appreciate all the clicks and the listens and the thumbs ups and the likes and the comments, especially, man. I like hearing from you guys. I want to hear more. Anything that helps get the word out. Because once again, I mean, I don't know. Despite the following that this has gathered, I would still do this here and there because these are things that I have to get out. There's an overarching behind the scenes process to all of this, as I'm trying to more or less create some kind of conceptual architecture, as it were, behind a lot of the ideas and events discussed in various episodes of this show. It may not seem like it because it it hardly seems like it to me most of the time, but there is an overarching connective tissue. The underlying concept of the show being that even a quote-unquote crazy person has worthwhile ideas, and that even if these are bad ideas, we can still learn something. We can learn about the culture that produced these ideas and this person. We can learn about where we're going and where we've been and where we're at ideologically, conceptually. Where do these ideas come from? How do they affect the world around us? How do they affect the people that, partake in these ideas? Or just more or less innocent bystanders of a concept or idea. Yes, this underlying conceptual scaffolding, architecture, invisible architecture of ideas, whatever you want to call it, will continue to be a running theme throughout the background of every episode and throughout this whole series. So I mean, I don't know. It's all about the just random juxtaposition of ideas here and there. You know, like bisociation, I believe it's called, and or that's the word for it. Just you never really think of a certain idea a certain way until you associate that idea with another idea, and you form these chain links of thought and thought process and idea, and how these things connect, and how one idea has a certain meaning, but when you juxtapose it to another idea or concept, it radically changes the idea or what sort of thought processes behind the ideas. I don't know. It's all this stuff is very interesting to me. It's the ideas behind ideas, and the use of ideas, and how certain ideas can be, let's say, co-opted or weaponized, and that we all live by narratives. You know, our brains work in a cause and effect sort of thought process, and it's how we think and how we process ideas and concepts that more or less dictates our reality and causes the world to unfold around us the way that it does. And sometimes, once again, you don't think of a certain idea a certain way until you look at it in the context of other ideas. So, yeah, that's enough of me rambling. Yeah, so let's see. Show, subscribers. Yeah, once again, you guys are awesome. Thank you. Depression, boo-hoo, got that done. Fungus, got that out of the way. So yeah, I guess let's jump right into the rest of Occult Crime Atlas Japan Part 2 after a word from our sponsors. Well, hello there. You know, drinking is America's favorite national pastime. And unfortunately, a byproduct of drinking is the much dreaded hangover. However, hangovers can now be a thing of the past with liqueur. Liquure. Liqueur gummies combine DHM, milk thistle, B vitamins, and ginger root to help your body recover after drinking. They fight fatigue, nausea, and dehydration, so you wake up feeling refreshed. Try them for faster recovery and enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code ICON, I-C-O-N. Go to liqueur.com, Liquure.com, and use the promo code ICON, I-C-O-N, for 20% off your entire purchase. Thank you. You know, the world is a hectic place, and it only breeds more hecticness, hectical thought. It's hectic. It's hectic is what it is, and sometimes you need to calm down. And to help you calm down, there are Shimmerwood beverages. Shimmerwood's award-winning CBD seltzers combine full-spectrum CBD with natural fruit shrubs, delivering a refreshing, stress-relieving drink that eases tension and promotes relaxation. Relaxation! Relaxation! Enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code ICON, I-C-O-N, at Shimmerwood.com. That's Shimmerwood.com. Use the promo code ICON for 30% off any product, exclusively through Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast. Thank you. So, Occult Crimes Atlas Japan Part 2. Like I said, this is going to be a little lighter than the last episode, but still, there's some highly weird shit going on. One of the key examples of spiritual child training, quote unquote, intersecting with imperialist and or military interests would include the Institute for Psychical Research, aka the Shinregaku Kinkyujo, and various other wartime psi programs. This is an active time frame of about the mid to late 1930s to the 1940s, largely located in Tokyo. However, this specific example, the Institute for Psychical Research, began in Tokyo and was later relocated to Kyoto. The Institute, while originally private and scientific in nature, was co-opted by military intelligence, especially the TOCO. T-O, not a delicious Tex-Mex food, but the TOKKO, the Special Higher Police. It's a select Army intelligence unit. Essentially, these were like the secret police of secret police. Like, these were the main dudes. There were children involved, obviously. Some children reportedly identified as quote-unquote highly sensitive or quote-unquote telepathic, were subjected to experiments in precognition and remote viewing, which is termed Toshi, which is also a gentleman's name, I believe. Revenge of the Nerds, possibly? Wasn't his name Toshi? We'll come back to that. No, we won't. Former Institute records confiscated by post-war American intelligence, allegedly referred to a category of shonen ninja, or child thought imagers. These were gifted children capable of producing spirit photographs or predicting air raids, which seems mighty useful. There is also the Omoto K's youth training and imperial suppression. The group, Omoto, was an esoteric Shinto-derived group. We mentioned them several times previously. It's essentially true origin is what it translates to. And this is a Shūkyō, a new religious movement, which were very big all throughout the 20th and today still 20th century, late 1800s as well in Japan. There was after the war, a very flip approach to these new religious movements, unless it corresponded to or aligned very well with state-sponsored state Shinto, then it was a big no-no. But of course, after the war, there was a lot more openness and willingness to accept, or at least tolerate, these Shinshūkyō, these new religious movements. And this is also, in a way, kind of what bit Japan on the ass leading up to the terrorist attack by Aum Shinrikyo, because there's a very touchy, I don't know, kind of situation when it comes to religious movements, because you don't want to be seen as suppressing these if you are, in fact, a government institute or entity. But there was another group called the Omoto K, who had a youth training group, we'll call it. Omoto ran youth programs, including spiritual awakening camps that trained children to engage in automatic writing, possession rituals, and clairvoyance. In its early years, Omoto had ambiguous ties to nationalist circles, but after 1935, the government cracked down violently on the group for promoting millenarian prophecies, doomsday type shit, Y2K. It's right around the corner. Remember Y2K, when the world ended? Reminds me of 1997 when Skynet went active. Anywho, they were seen as rivalrous, in direct opposition to the Emperor's cult. However, before suppression, some child, quote-unquote, visionaries were being monitored by the TOCO. That's going to get weird every time I say it, but it's TOKKO, the secret police. It may have been of interest to military psychological researchers. There's also the Nichiren-influenced nationalist cults of child mediums. Like, certain child mediums had small cult-like followings around them. There were militarist-leaning offshoots of Nichiren Buddhism, such as Hitonomichi or Genri Nihon, or it's Genri or Genri. I'm still not sure on the pronunciation. And once again, you're going to hear me butcher quite a bit of Japanese. It's unfortunate, but I'm just a silly American, so what do I know? There were claims Japan had been spiritually chosen to lead the world in a new era, and this is largely the crux of many of the imperialist spiritual thought systems that were very prevalent at the time. But these groups occasionally train children in quote-unquote divine speech and martial virtues, combining Buddhist chanting with early martial instructions. A few were believed to have channeled military orders or battle omens via child mediums. So they're essentially taking, to a degree, they're taking their marching orders, like quite literally, from these child mediums who acted as the conduit or channel of some kami or god or spirit, a non-human intelligence, which, when you put it that way, puts a whole new weird menacing spin on things. Some of these cults offered their child mediums to military temples for blessings or readings prior to troop deployments. Naval intelligence reports from 1931 to 1941 reference these groups' influence in local conscription drives, and morale building programs. I don't know how bad morale could have been, but you've essentially got kamikaze warriors who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the divine emperor. So morale must have been through the roof to warrant a thought process such as this. But I digress. There were Tako surveillance of spiritualist schools from the 30s to 40s, many informal homes and schools that trained quote-unquote special or spiritually pure children were surveilled by the Tako, particularly if they espoused millenarian or anti-modern views. Being that, the millennium was not too far away from this happens every time. I can only imagine, going into the year 1000, how many groups like this were around, and we won't see it, but I'm sure it'll happen again if humanity is still around. The groups that weren't shut down were often coerced into aligning with militarist ideology, and their rhetoric shifted toward national salvation through sacrifice. Sound familiar? At least 2 quote-unquote patriotic spiritist schools began reciting emperor hymns, blending the kamikaze ideology with divine child concepts. And this is also a huge sort of, I don't know, I guess the word would be archetype, like a reoccurring trope that, especially in Shinto and Buddhism, a lot of Eastern religious thought, really, of the divine child, like this God child. I mean, we kind of have it in the West, baby Jesus, but this is like the Golden Child, starring Eddie Murphy, and that flying dagger that later reprised its role in the shadow. Anywho. There were psychic warfare projects and pure soul children mythology running around. These two sort of collided with each other. And in the wartime years, especially 1942 to 44, there were even alleged urban legends and unconfirmed reports that certain elite children were being raised in mountain compounds to become pure-souled clairvoyants who could detect enemy movements from afar or channel protective kami to shield soldiers. No official documents verify this, but U.S. intelligence analysis post-war era took such claims seriously enough to note in Psy-War threat assessments. For a deeper dive into these intersections of pre-war psychic/medium training and child clairvoyance programs and their links on the imperialist regime, plus how such phenomena was addressed during the American occupation, you can check out the Shinrai Gaku Institute and Military Psychic Research, 1930s to 40s, the Shinri Kagaku Kenkyukai, or Japan Society for Psychical Research, which was founded by Asano Wasaburo, and later led by Fukurai Tomokichi, who, for those who maybe that name sounds a little familiar, Fukurai was the one who was heavily involved with all of the psychic thoughtography stuff going on in the 20s. Essentially the story that lies as the background basis for The Ring, or Ringu. I forget the woman's name, but we did a episode on this whole kerfuffle way back in the day when the show started. It's in the archives. But yeah, this began as a private parapsychology organization focused on phenomena like psychokinesis, thoughtography, or ninsha, as it's called, and spirit photography. So by the late 1930s, the institute drew the interest of imperial authorities and police intelligence, aka the taco, delicious. Reports indicate that children identified as quote-unquote psychically gifted were sometimes housed in experimental programs exploring remote viewing, precognition, and psi-based warfare, aligned with the taco and Army intelligence's investigations of various wartime doings transpiring. The Special Higher Police, or taco, expanded into ideological surveillance after the Peace Preservation Law of 1925. A quote-unquote thought section, so thought police, essentially, was established in 1927, which monitored dissident spiritual and religious movements, including those tied to mediumship or millennium-based prophecy and rhetoric. Informal spiritist homes and psychic training centers were monitored for signs of subversive or militarily exploitable ideology. This is what I was talking about earlier, like the co-opting, the hijacking of ideas and concepts and belief systems, or the manipulation and weaponization of such thought programs, thought systems, belief systems, etc. Children with exceptional abilities were sometimes tracked or recruited into covert research channels. There's, once again, the Omoto, the True Origin Shinto group. This is the group that I mentioned last episode that was started by a octogenarian woman who was illiterate. However, while possessed by various spirits, she wrote down roughly 2,000 prophecies. So, pretty weird, to say the least. But it was continued on by, I believe, her grandson, and was somewhat tolerated during the war, but they became a huge influence after the war. They sort of popped back up, and their teachings and beliefs were incorporated into many other groups, specifically of a Shinto-based variety. They were also one of the few that essentially codified a system of spirit possession that could be used for divination purposes, just anything you wanted to talk to a spirit about or glean information from a spirit about what may be going on in the war or what may be going on after the war. Also with a largely Japanocentric ethnical ideology. So Omoto was, once again, the esoteric Shinto-derived new religion that attracted scrutiny for its youth vision camps and spiritual training programs that included automatic writing, trance possession, and prophetic dreamscapes, or basically lucid dreaming, which I believe they used certain lucid dreaming programs that were sort of co-opted from Tibetan Buddhist practices, but that's largely speculation on my part. Though persecuted in 1921 and again in 1935 under the lèse-majesté and censorship laws, lèse-majesté was like a national law that was sort of it all incorporated into the centrality of the emperor's divine status. So prior to suppression, some of its child mediums were closely followed by the Tako as potential ideological or psychic assets. Ultranationalist offshoots of Nichiren Buddhism, such as Hitano Michi and Genri Nihon or Genri Nihon, occasionally deployed children in ritual or predictive roles, trying spiritual possession, essentially, to imperialist ideology. Naval intelligence reports from 1939 to 1941 reference these groups offering child mediums for morale ceremonies or battle blessings, blending national myth with psychic traditions. After 1945, the GHQ, that's the Occupying American Forces, and its agencies pursued religious and ideological reform. The Tako was abolished, and the Civil Censorship Detachment monitored spiritual publications until 1949. Also weird to note that General Douglas MacArthur was viewed as a god by many people. Strange. I don't know. It's just, they had the human statement from Hirohito saying, hey, I'm not a god, I'm just a dude. Everyone chill out. And then kind of just, rob Peter to pay Paul. And now Douglas MacArthur is seen as a divine entity. I digress. Many psychic societies, including Anschluss mediumist schools and occult groups, were deregistered, censored, or dissolved. Put the kibosh on a lot of them. But at the same time, psychology education and clinical psychiatry became American modeled, largely neo-behaviorism and group dynamics being a large focus, and belief in spirit possession was increasingly medicalized or trivialized in mainstream institutions. This is all part of the modernization that had been going on since the turn of the 20th century. Japan, for a large part, throughout much of its history, has been very isolationist. Most of the Eastern nations and powers have been isolationist, but with the advent of psychology, there was a large reframing of many spiritual ideas and movements, and that's why most of these incidents, especially many mentioned in the first, you will find not mentioned in papers or religious documents or textbooks, etc. You find most of them in psychological journals, criminal reports that were largely also relegated to these sort of publications as well. The TACO, aka Special Higher Police, not a delicious Tex-Mex meal, had memos and reports related to specific child psychic cases, revealing how authorities monitored and at times experimented with children believed to have supernatural abilities. There were CIA files that revealed that, according to the CIA document summarizing Japanese parapsychological program, 2 children identified via pseudonym as Kyoto and Yamashita were subjects of psychic research experiments dating to the late 1930s. A dissenting official wrote that these children, quote, possessed psychic power from when they were small, unquote, but criticized the methods as unreasonable demands with no discipline and that their health was endangered. This memo reveals explicit concern over the use of minors in experiments involving remote viewing, spirit photography, and other ESP practices under military-accepted pseudoscience. This is, once again, according to CIA documentation. The Special Higher Police, aka the TACO, I'm just going to call them the Special Higher Police. The TACO thing is going to throw me off every time. Anywho, the Special Higher Police Thought Crime Section, active from 1927 onward, systematically monitored youth training camps and organizations that practiced clairvoyance and automatic writing. All through last episode and this episode, and just this time frame, many of these new religious movements, or Shūkyō, automatic writing is another huge part of much of their religious, aka spiritualist practices. There were even informal spiritist homes and quote-unquote special children's schools, which came under scrutiny if they generated prophetic or nationalist messaging, a concern for ideological control, obviously. Records frequently mention investigating child mediums for signs of subversive spirituality or potential utility in wartime propaganda or morale rituals. Some entry logs and internal documents referenced indirectly by the Special Higher Police memos note cases of shonen ninja, which were boys capable of thoughtography or mediumistic spirit photography. These boys were earmarked for further experimentation or ideological vetting, though direct evidence of deployment into the military remains limited. During the American occupation, the Special Higher Police was disbanded, and its files were confiscated or shelved, allegedly. Psychic research institutes were either dissolved or repurposed under new psychiatric paradigms, emphasizing clinical diagnosis over supernatural claims. Publications and records related to child psychic training were censored or destroyed, limiting post-war access to direct evidence of government-sponsored experimentation. The special hire police surveillance of child psychics and the partial use of children in psychic research projects indicates a troubling intersection of ideology and occultism in pre-war Japan. Children with alleged abilities were seen as possible assets for nationalistic or intelligence purposes. Dissenting memo writers, worried about the ethical and psychological harm facing these children, suggest internal resistance to these practices was not entirely absent from an institutional standpoint. There are excerpts from declassified CIA files and related takako, or special hire police surveillance reports, that shine a rather revealing light on how pre-war Japanese authorities and later foreign observers treated children believed to possess psychic powers. Once again, there's the aforementioned Kyoto and Yamashita. This is from the CIA-cited case. These were two experimental subjects from the 1930s. Two children, referred to under pseudonyms as Kyoto and Yamashita, were repeatedly tested in the late 1930s in Japan for alleged ESP abilities, including thoughtography and clairvoyance. These experiments were apparently overseen or at least surveilled by special hire police and army intelligence because of their potential wartime use. Kyoto, one of the two subjects, would eventually confess that his demonstrations were fraudulent. A hidden camera captured him admitting that he physically bent a spoon, not using psychic force. Yamashita, the other subject, performed blindfolded tests. Successful card reading was later attributed to subtle visual loopholes. He could see through the gap in his blindfold, or her blindfold, invalidating the claims of clairvoyance when his eyes were completely sealed off. It was a he. Okay. Let's see. The special hire police closely monitored institutions like the Japanese Society for Psychical Research, particularly any centers that trained or identified children with alleged psychic talent. Authorities were interested in whether such children could serve as tools for propaganda or psychological operations, psyops. A list of shonin-insha, aka boys capable of thoughtography, appear in internal tracking logs. These children were occasionally earmarked for further research or ideological vetting. So not only do we have to ensure that you may or may not have psychic abilities, we also need to make sure that you're on the same page as us, ideologically speaking. While it's not confirmed they were ever deployed into military roles, their identification raised concern within high-level police and intelligence circles. After 1945, under GHQ occupation, the special hire police was abolished and many psychic research institutes were shut down or absorbed into psychiatric and behavioral science paradigms. So the supernatural aspect was just glossed over, dissolved, overlooked, and reincorporated into a much more modernized psychological approach and belief system viewpoint, so to speak. Records of programs and experiments involving child mediums were either censored or destroyed. Public discourse shifted decisively toward explaining possession phenomena through medical and psychological frameworks, effectively erasing much of the earlier mysticism from mainstream recognition. There are translated excerpts and detailed analysis drawn from declassified CIA files and associated special hire police surveillance materials. These documents offer a rare glimpse into how child psychic cases, especially involving individuals codenamed Kyoto and Yamashita, were scrutinized as possible assets to Japan's pre-war military and intelligence apparatus, as well as how they were treated or suppressed during the American occupation era. There's excerpt A from the CIA files, Masuaki Kyoto, the spoon-bending hoax. Kyoto, initially lauded for bending spoons psychically, was eventually exposed on Fuji TV. This is much later in life, obviously. A covert camera revealed Kyoto admitted he was bending spoons manually using force, saying, quote, "The pressure to perform became so great I just had to use physical force." A panelist remarked, quote, "Even an 84-year-old grandmother could learn this trick once practiced." Ooh, harsh. There were experimental schedules and ESP tests both children underwent. prolonged testing under conditions requiring relentless performance. Quote, they do not have instructions to provide necessary discipline, unreasonable demands. Psychologists cautioned their health was endangered. Instances occurred where psychic quote-unquote shutdowns were misinterpreted as signs of failure, causing them psychological distress. In tests described for blindfolded readings, Yamashita reportedly peeked through small gaps, invalidating his clairvoyance credibility. Quote, he was able to read cards because he could see through a gap in the blindfold. Once sealed completely, his performance dropped significantly, unquote. The Special Higher Police's Thought Section, the Thought Police, actively monitored institutions such as the Japanese Society for Psychical Research, especially for experimental programs involving children labeled as shonen ninja, or the boys who produced photographs. We'll go with that. These children are viewed as potential psychological assets or propaganda tools and tracked in internal intelligence logs. One quotation says, lists of shonen ninja appear in surveillance files indicating children earmarked for further investigation or deployment. The Special Higher Police was officially abolished, and many psychic research groups were disbanded or integrated into psychiatric frameworks, as mentioned before. Publications, archives, and psychic program records, including child medium training, were censored, destroyed, or suppressed. Public discourse shifted toward labeling possession phenomena as psychological or psychiatric, not paranormal phenomena. It matters, largely in part because of what these documents reveal. Children were actively monitored as ideological or psychic subjects by both intelligence services and mainstream media. Experiments and public exposure pushed children beyond reasonable psychological limits, a fact later lamented by internal observers. And the American occupation censorship and psychiatric framing helped bury this era's parapsychological pursuits, letting them fade into obscurity or medicalized treatment. Essentially, the entire reframing of Japan's centuries-long spiritual traditions were recontextualized in an entirely psychological model, as opposed to that of anything that smacked of the occult or mysticism, though much of it still survives to this day. Now, I want to get into a little bonus post-World War II weirdness. For the most part, we are leaving behind much of the imperialist mind frame, though it still persists to this day in quite a dramatic prevalence throughout Japan. But I wanted to explore something called Denpa crimes. These are real and recognized crimes. They are recognized in Japanese criminology as Denpa Hanzai, or Denpa crimes. The term came to use in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and refers to cases where perpetrators claimed that their violent actions were caused by radio waves, electromagnetic interference, or other invisible forces, quote-unquote, controlling them. It's a Japanese cultural legal category for the mentally ill or delusional criminal offenders, especially those with paranoid schizophrenia. Denpa literally means radio wave, but on the average, the everyday use in the street, it came to mean weird vibes or brain waves, and essentially has extended to meaning a delusional person. The reason these interest me is because I find the overlap between mental illness, quote-unquote mental illness, with psychotronics, alleged weaponry used to manipulate the mind, psychic warfare, etc. All of this is very, very deep. There's so much of it, and once we get to like the Russia and China episodes, man, I'm like, oh, I'm going crazy just reading it. It's probably why I just need to touch grass. Okay, so Shonen A. This is the name attributed to one of the offenders in the Kobe child murders. This is 1997. A 14-year-old boy who killed and mutilated 2 children in Kobe. In his later statements, he referenced being quote-unquote controlled or compelled by strange forces and displayed behavior associated with Dinpa delusions. This case popularized the term Dinpa-kei or Dinpa type in media. There's also the Tokyo Akihabara massacre in 2008, perpetrated by Tomohiro Kato. Kato drove a truck into a crowd and stabbed bystanders after exiting, killing 7 people. While not explicitly framed as electromagnetic control, in his online postings he expressed a sense of alienation and delusional thinking tied to the Dinpa-kei stereotype. Media frequently connected this case to the Dinpa-type crime discourse, essentially. There's also the 1979 Shinjuku bus hijacking. The perpetrator claimed electromagnetic mind control. There's the 1981 Fukuoka Dinpa killer. Sorry, every time I see the name of Fukuoka written out, it just makes me think of fuck you, okay? Sorry, I just had to say it. Anyways, so 1981 Fukuoka Dinpa killer. The man murdered several people, insisting that radio waves were controlling his mind. Basically, these early incidents were what cemented the term Dinpa. While Dinpa crimes aren't occult in the black magic sense, they overlap with psychotronic and mind control paranoia, which sits at the edge of occult and conspiracy culture. In Japan, this became a pop cultural archetype, the Dinpa-kei character in manga and anime, a isolated, paranoid, convinced of being controlled by some unseen force individual. It reflects a modern mythos of invisible forces, similar to how Westerners speak of MK Ultra, Monarch, HARP, or electronic harassment, targeted individuals, if you will. Dinpa crimes are real and documented. They're not about ritual murder, per se, but about the delusion of electromagnetic or radio wave persecution and control of an individual. The concept is important in post-war Japanese crime history and intersects with wider occult/technological paranoia. Another group I wanted to discuss, and there's, like I said, like post-World War II, these Shūkyō, new religious movements, there's so many of them. And, I mean, you've got your pick of the litter. And seeing that this is largely crime-related, a lot of them, like I said, with some of the Brazil groups that I mentioned, just because I thought they were interesting, mostly harmless, not associated with any criminal activity. This particular group, they have some borderline criminal involvement, and that group is Panawave Laboratories. And this follows on the heels of Dinpa because this is like their whole shtick, essentially. It's widely considered to be a UFO/doomsday cult, new religious movement, Shūkyō. It emerged in the late 20th century and became briefly infamous in 2003, as it is notable for its unusual blend of pseudoscience, doomsday prophecy, anti-electromagnetic paranoia, and New Age-style UFO beliefs. It was founded around the late 70s, early 80s by Yuko Chino, a woman who claimed to be a spiritual medium and the interpreter of cosmic forces. Cosmic forces. Cosmic forces. Once again, cosmic forces. It's either the ascended masters, the cosmic forces. It's always this disembodied, non-human intelligence, which the more I say non-human intelligence, it just puts a much more sinister spin on things, doesn't it? The official front group began as an offshoot of a spiritualist group called Shōwa, or True Law of Chino. Chino being Yuko Chino, the founder. They were initially based in Fukui Prefecture, later known for its mobile convoys of white vehicles. These are the white van people your parents and loved ones told you to watch out for. The fact that there is a UFO doomsday cult rolling around in white vans and, just paranoid of electromagnetic mind control. Goddamn, this is just the stuff I live for. Panawave is often categorized as a syncretic UFO religion with elements of apocalyptic prophecy. They predicted a magnetic pole shift and a world-ending catastrophe, which is often blamed on Hey, not the Jews this time. That's refreshing. Scalar electromagnetic waves. Evil electromagnetic radiation. That's evil in quotes. That's what they call it. I'm not quite sure how I'm guessing that from this viewpoint that, and this is an assumption on my part, speculation on my part, but the radiation itself has some kind of evil alignment. It's not any certain human faction that's controlling it or using it for evil. It is the force in itself that exerts a malevolence of some kind. They were paranoid of electromagnetic radiation from high voltage lines, microwaves, and other sources. They believed in cosmic intervention, that benevolent cosmic beings, or aliens, for lack of a better term, cosmic intelligences, etc., ascended masters, I mean, it's interchangeable at this point, who were trying to save the Earth, but were being blocked by environmental contamination and interference. This may mean the malevolent electromagnetic forces that are, inherently evil within themselves. They believed in purification. That's always gotta watch out for this one. All members wore white clothing and covered their vehicles, buildings, and equipment in white fabric, believing that it would shield them from these harmful electromagnetic waves. They also believed that Yuko Chino, their founder, was a messiah-like figure who could be seen as their spiritual leader / savior, who was also, of course, in communication with higher beings, whatever that entails. Non-human intelligences, once again. Perhaps they are most well known for their involvement in the Tama-chan incident in 2003. Panawave briefly made international news in 2003 during the so-called Tama-chan seal incident. A bearded seal named Tama-chan had appeared in Tokyo rivers and attracted public fascination. Panawave claimed the seal was a cosmic harbinger essential to Earth's fate and that it was being harmed by electromagnetic waves. Okay. They attempted to capture the seal in April 2003, leading to a bizarre media frenzy and police intervention. Shortly afterwards, they predicted a doomsday event on May 15th, 2003, involving a pole shift and a tsunami, which of course never happened. Following the Shinrikyo sarin gas attacks in 1995, Japan became highly wary of fringe religious movements, yet at the same time, they had to maintain a certain, as I said before, sort of hands-off approach. It's very delicate. In 2003, Panawave was monitored closely by Japanese authorities, but was found to be non-violent, mostly harmless. I don't know, ask the seal. After Yuko Chino's death in 2006, the group rapidly declined in activity and public visibility. As of the 2010s, only a few adherents reportedly remained. The group is effectively dormant or defunct. I'm sure they're around still. They believed, once again, that they were in contact with alien and or higher dimensional beings, intelligences, etc., and that their intervention in our public or in our everyday affairs was essentially a given. They anticipated a cosmic disaster related to Earth's environment and magnetic fields, and integrated New Age UFO concepts, pseudoscience, and Japanese apocalyptic Shinto Buddhist motifs. They're often compared to groups like Ryalism, Ryal, the sexy cloning UFO doomsday cult of international prestige, but with more domestic cult behavior and less international presence. There's also a group called Mahikari, which is also known as the Sakai Mahikari Bunmei Kyodan, or World Divine Light Organization. This was founded in 1959 by Yoshikazu Okada, also called Tsukuinushi-sama, aka Lord Savior, aka Kotama Okada, a former officer in the Imperial Japanese Army. He claimed to receive a divine light revelation from Su-God, a universal deity. That's S-U-God, instructing him to bring about a spiritual revolution through the quote-unquote purification of the world. Terrifying. Obviously, these guys didn't get up to anything big, or they'd be a little bit better known, but just the term purification ought to make you look a little harder. Their core beliefs centered on the transmission of quote-unquote true light, or mahikari no waza, which is a healing, purifying spiritual energy said to come from God. The light is emitted through the hand, typically over the forehead or body of the recipient, that can be channeled from the palm of the hand to purify spiritual impurities and illness. So sort of a laying on of hands, charismatic religious type thing meets Reiki, I believe it's called. They accept karma, reincarnation, and a form of divine cosmology rooted in Japanese Shinto but universalized through theosophical style influences. Theosophy, the more I look into just everything whatsoever, Theosophy has a hand in much of it, and be that as just a prototype of combining Eastern and Western spiritual and religious systems of belief. Yeah, their influence stretches far beyond anything you would think from just a one-off late 1800s group. But the more I'm looking into occult beliefs in pre-Soviet Russia, I don't know. Some of it's how far are you willing to stretch your credulity, as far as, does this stuff just pop up, or does it have a hand? Is it influenced? And that's another thing that I enjoy looking into with a lot of this stuff. Like, where do these thoughts come from? Because they don't always just pop up out of someone's head. Sometimes they have a little bit of government funding. But they put an emphasis on spiritual purification of both the body and society. Scary. Similar in function to, yes, the aforementioned Reiki or Jo-Rei, which is a similar system of, I guess the closest Western equivalent would be like invocation or evocation of a sort of divine light energy. But they also are deeply embedded in a messianic worldview, and usually messianic worldview and millenarianism go hand in hand. Their influences come from Okada's military background and the framing of their mission as a global spiritual conquest, which mirrors state Shinto's ideology and the earlier Omotokiyo blend of emperor worship with divine mission. Mahikari inherited or absorbed many symbolic, nationalistic, and apocalyptic tropes from wartime spiritual movements, including a divine destiny for Japan. Okada admired the Yamato race's spiritual destiny and at times mirrored ultra-nationalistic rhetoric in early sermons. For those unfamiliar, I believe I mentioned it last episode, the Yamato people are like the original Japanese people according to these sort of ethno-biological backgrounds, and also Genshi Shinwa, Genshi Shinwa, I believe it's called, the sort of primordial race myth behind much of the ultranationalist thought that places Japan and the Japanese people as the axis mundi, center of the world, and for that matter, center of all existence. Their doctrine references the aforementioned Su-God, S-U-God, which is a kind of supreme divine being associated with Japanese myths, but portrayed in an almost extraterrestrial or metaphysical way. Non-human intelligence. God as a non-human intelligence. Okay. Claims of a coming global cataclysm, followed by the arrival of a new divine civilization led by Japan as its spiritual center, as well as belief in ancient advanced aliens, especially stuff like Mu and Lemuria, often associated with UFO lore, especially ancient alien type stuff. There were several offshoots after Okada's death in 1974. The group splintered into Shūkyō Mahikari, which was headed by a Keishu Okada, who was his adopted daughter, which became more international and theosophical in their beliefs. There was the Sakai Mahikari Bunmei Kyodan, which was essentially the original organization, what they sort of morphed into. And then there were other groups like the Kinshokai and Yokoshi no Tomo, which sometimes intersected with related teachings. There's another group called Cosmomate, which I think is kind of a cute name, I guess. Cosmomate Kyodan, or the Cosmopolitan Mate Church, a more obscure but equally strange group reportedly founded by Toshihiko Ishizu, a former Mahikari member, in the 1980s. And the reason I mentioned this group, Mahikari, and all the press mouth flapping time associated to Omoto as well, it's because these groups were so influential and sort of branched off or were the underlying influence for many other groups. Alternatively said to be founded in the 1970s by Kaoru Nakamaru, a controversial and eccentric figure claiming both royal blood and alien contact. The group is far less well documented than Mahikari, but known for UFO-oriented mysticism, spiritual purification, and cosmic evolution ideas. There is a blend of theosophy, Eastern religion, obviously, apocalyptic Christian mysticism, and UFO contactee lore. Followers believe in an upcoming spiritual awakening where humanity must align with higher vibrational forces from space or be left behind. Copyright. Some rumors claim the group believes the Japanese people are descended from celestial beings, tying into pseudo-historical myths of divine origin. Once again, the Genshi Shinwa, primal myth narrative. There's contact with space brothers, quote-unquote, the use of light rituals, healing, and meditation, claim telepathic contact with benevolent extraterrestrial beings, non-human intelligences. Similar hand-healing techniques to Mahikari, but more explicitly framed as coming from galactic entities, quote-unquote. They're less documented, but publicly, or better known for their private rituals, which is odd, channeling sessions, selling spiritual tools, books, and attending New Age expos, you know, all the money-making shit that goes along with New Age beliefs, and retreats and teachings centered on, quote-unquote, vibrational upgrades with 2 Ds for a double dose of divine purification from cosmic beings. Now, while not a specific belief system that I can see, I mean, there are groups centered around some of the stuff I'm fixing to talk about, but I see this as sort of a loose confederation of ideas that is sort of blending together to become one of the more central ideas or concepts to some of these groups operating in Japan today that are tilting on the axis of spiritual beliefs with UFO group type stuff. Now, there's a mountain called Mount Kurama that is known for Tengu, the bird yokai. There's 2 types of Tengu. There's the more birdman, like the birdman type sort of yokai, and then there's more of a Yamabushi, sort of like a mountain wizard type. But these are essentially under the same banner of being, of non-human entity, so to speak. Now, Mount Kurama is associated with Sojobo, who is the king of the Tengu, legendary mountain spirits with long noses and supernatural powers. Tengu were once seen as demonic, but later became protective or enlightened figures, especially in esoteric Buddhism and Shugendo. Kurama Temple, aka Kurama Dera, is associated with ascetic training, martial arts, specifically Ushiwakamaru and Minamoto no Yoshitsune, who trained there, as well as specific quote-unquote hidden knowledge. There's also very pronounced theosophical connections. Modern spiritual groups, including some Mahikari-adjacent circles and Japanese theosophists, claim that the Tengu of Kurama is actually Sanat Kumara, a Venusian spiritual being from theosophical lore, one of the Ascended Masters. Sanat Kumara is an advanced spiritual being who came to Earth 6.5 million years ago to guide humanity's evolution. Some claim Sanat Kumara is the true identity of the Kurama deity, creating a direct link between Japanese mountain mysticism and global esoteric cosmology. This Venusian elder lives in Shambhala, rules the spiritual hierarchy of Earth, and is a kind of occult Christ figure. This being is said to reside within or beneath Mount Kurama, guiding Japan's spiritual destiny. He's also been called the Defender Lord, which makes him sound like a badass superhero of some kind. The idea appears in both Japanese New Age books and translated theosophical texts promoted in Mahikari-related circles and fringe UFO movements like Cosmomate. Japan, like parts of interwar Europe, Russia, and Tibet, hosted a fascinating fusion of nationalist esotericism, pseudo-apocalyptic Shambhala myth, and Maitreya or Moroku beliefs. That is the future Buddha, the Messiah Buddha, essentially. The future Buddha who's going to come one day and fix all this shit up and put us in order. Especially during the late Meiji through Showa period, so roughly the 1890s to 1945 is when these beliefs were really taking off. Several Shambhala-related or Maitreya-linked sects arose, or adopted older traditions that incorporated apocalyptic messianism, Pan-Asian nationalism, spiritual race theories, and belief in a divine realm or savior that would descend to transform the world, hence the Shambhala, Maitreya, etc. Now, key groups, once again, Omoto, mentioned several times, was founded in 1892 by Deguchi Nao, systemized later by her, I believe, grandson, Deguchi Onisaburo. This had Shambhala tie-ins as well. Onisaburo claimed that the reincarnation or forerunner of Moroku or Maitreya was destined to establish a utopian kingdom on Earth. He explicitly borrowed from Theosophy, Buddhism, and Chinese cosmology, blending it with Japanese Kokutai ideology, the divine nation. Basically, Japan's version of all that Aryan bullshit that Germany was spouting during World War II. Not a one-on-one comparison, but it helps you kind of put it in context, so to speak. Onisaburo also staged elaborate rituals and theatrical productions that echoed Shambhala imagery, hidden kings, cosmic battles, underground cities, etc. And Omoto had imperialist overtones, envisioning a pan-Asian spiritual empire led by who else but Japan. Now, the more I'm looking into all this occult crime stuff from just a few nations that I picked out, but Shambhala / Agartha, this whole secret underground kingdom from Buddhist mythology has played a huge part in influencing politics at the turn of the century, at the turn of the 20th century, like big time. We'll get into more of it down the road when we get into some of the Russian stuff I have for a future episode, but my God, it's weird to think that, I mean, I don't know. We live in America where we have such a thing as Christian nationalists all up in our government. So, I don't know, it's just weird to think that this Buddhist mythology influenced and directed the course of global politics the way that it did. So, I don't know. I'm trying to show that by association that even with Christianity too, it's just so weird that this stuff exerts such an influence on politics. I don't know. People, I guess it's just the mindset of the Judeo-Christian Western mind that it doesn't really it doesn't really clock in people's thoughts like it should, I guess, because it's always background. It's like part of your life or whatever. But the influence that the myth and the quote-unquote prophecies of certain religious systems and beliefs exert such an amount of influence on politics is just frightening. It's frightening. Some Nichiren linked nationalist sects were also included in this mix. Nichiren Buddhist offshoots, especially in the early 20th century, interpreted Maitreya as a savior figure aligned with Japanese imperial destiny. And while less concerned with Shambhala per se, they fused Lotus Sutra prophecy, apocalyptic war, and the coming of a world ruler, either Moroku or a Japanese bodhisattva emperor. Some fringe Nichiren sects often interpreted World War II as the prophesied Dharma-ending age preceding Maitreya's return. Kali Yuga. This is a phrase that's also inextricably linked with 20th and 21st century politics. You see it mentioned in accelerationist theories and ideology. It's part of what makes a lot of this stuff so scary, that we are living in these, not necessarily end times, but that things are so degraded and shitty that going back and starting over is the only thing that's going to fix everything, according to certain people's thought processes. Didn't work out too well when a guy named Pol Pot tried it and, sent everything to year zero. It just turned into a competition of how many soldiers can throw how many babies against a tree. It's just bad. It's all bad. We have foundations and ideas and past history to learn from and build from and learn from mistakes. I just don't see a reset, a great reset, or whatever you want to call it, being the fix. But hey, I'm just a fat white dude on the internet, whatever. There's the whole Hitler, Maitreya, Shambhala syncretism too. Japan's fringe occultists during the 1930s and 40s, some ultranationalist circles and Nichiren fascists reportedly became fascinated with Nazi and theosophical occultism. There was the unfortunate hijacking. I attribute this largely to turn of phrase and vocabulary that was used in Blavatsky's original writings and concepts and ideas. It was easily hijacked by the Nazis. The figure of Maitreya is a cosmic Aryan leader, a Japanese spiritual mission to either oppose or join the Shambhala War, as described in some theosophical and Tibetan Buddhist prophecies. The Shambhala War, or Agartha War, the Buddhist doomsday prophecies, the Kalachakra Tantra, etc. There's a lot of stuff about holy war against Islam in there. It's crazy. I don't know. Not a lot of people associate Buddhism with, war in any way, but it's everyone, everything. There are no heroes. Once you get the space to look, yep, something stinks somewhere. So, well, that's just, we're people. That's what we do. So yeah, Shambhala was equated with the Gobi Desert / Inner Asia, and the Maitreya was associated with Kalki or the Mahdi, which was also associated with Hitler as either a false or quote-unquote misunderstood figure. Some of these ideas trickled into obscure Pan-Asianist Manchurian millenarian sects. There's another group called Eigon-shū, founded in 1978 by Kiriyama Seiyu, who claimed that Maitreya, or Moroku, the Japanese name for Maitreya, had already arrived in spirit and was guiding Japan through apocalyptic times. This incorporated the Agama Sutras, esoteric Buddhism, ancestor worship, and some Shambhala-style imagery of sacred cosmic realms. Kiriyama visited sites across Asia that were believed to be connected to Shambhala and claimed to receive messages from celestial beings, i.e., non-human intelligences. Several fringe sects and New Age movements in Japan began incorporating Shambhala into their teachings, often in connection with Venusian or solar masters, ascended masters, i.e. theosophical interpretations, if you will. Maitreya's earthly return, the ascension of Japan as a spiritually chosen land, that rhymed. Mahikari, the light-based purification and messianic overtones. Cosmomate, the blend of Space Brothers and messianic themes. Panawave Laboratories, though paranoid and weird, hinted at cosmic forces and world renewal, quote-unquote. So Mount Karama and Sanat Kumara, traditionally associated with Tengu, as mentioned before, but modern occultists, including some Reiki lineages, believe it to be the earth base of Sanat Kumara, the theosophical lord of the world, and Venusian Jesus and ruler of Shambhala. Sanat Kumara is often identified with Maitreya, Venusian wisdom, solar logos, energy, etc. And this belief gained popularity via Western New Age teachers and Japanese syncretic sects post-1980s. This is deeply embedded in New Age thought and philosophy. All this ascended masters, especially Sanat Kumara, cool. I don't know. Sanat Kumara seems like a cool guy to me, but just once again, it's how beliefs are harnessed hijacked, weaponized, etc. It all just depends on how we use them, you know. There are a few documented or reputed historical figures, especially with religious and ultranationalist movements in Japan, largely post-World War II, who either claimed divine descent from kami, much like the emperor was, until he said he wasn't, other than those traditionally linked to the imperial family. That would be the sun goddess Amaterasu, or were associated with darker or lesser-known kami, like Amatsu Mikaboshi, Susanoo, or Kunitsukami. These claims were often part of radical spiritual nationalist ideologies, millenarian movements, or esoteric sects. But in seeing that the Japanese imperial lineage claims descent from a sun goddess, you know, this is no different from the Western kings of Europe and divine right, the Chinese mandate of heaven. So I did a little looking around to see if there were any groups or individuals who claimed to come from lineages of other gods. Didn't really find anything. Basically, like the bad guy god, if you can call him that. I don't know. Amatsu Mikaboshi, he's like a chaos god in the Japanese Shinto pantheon. His name means the August Star of Heaven. I was trying to find if anyone was claiming descent from Amatsu Mikaboshi. No luck, though. I don't know. I feel like if anyone was, they probably would keep their mouth shut about it at this point in time in history, etc., seeing as how the human statement was made. But I have this just suspicion. I don't know. Maybe it's paranoid. Maybe I just live in a weird cartoon world. But groups like the Black Dragon Society or the Black Ocean, I feel like they might have palled around with some people who maybe made claims that they were possibly, I don't know, descendants of another major Shinto god. Like, there's so many of them that anyone could just jump out and say, hey, I'm, you know, related to the lineage of this particular god. But Amatsu Mikaboshi, the quote-unquote chaos god, particularly jumped out in my mind. I don't know, I just thought it'd be interesting if there was anyone claiming such, but there are odd, I want to say symbolic connections between Amatsu Mikaboshi from what I've seen. And, you know, keep in mind, I'm just a fat dude on the internet. Amatsu Mikaboshi is like portrayed as sort of like a black sun, like some kind of weird spiraling star of dark black color. So right there, you've already got some strange symbolic associations, but I could be, you know, this is definitely pure speculation on my part. I just thought it was strange that, I don't know, someone could, maybe I'm, by talking about this, possibly opening a dangerous can of worms. I don't know. But there were like groups that like the Greater Japan True Way Society, which was a lesser known group from the 1920s and 30s that was sort of a semi-occult nationalist sect. They were modeled directly on like fraternal knightly orders, and man, there's a whole bunch of these groups, especially in pre-World War II Japan. I mean, they still are around, and like Freemasons have a very prominent presence in Japan also, which is weird. But there's all these like knightly orders and chivalric societies, like, you know, like the Templars basically, but of purely Japanese origins. And there were certain groups alleged to pledge spiritual obedience to a quote-unquote hidden emperor and held ritual duels with like wooden swords as a spiritual discipline. Rites reportedly including like mirror ordeals involving the Yata no Kagami, or the Imperial Sacred Mirror, for purification and spiritual alignment. Japan has several sacred imperial treasures, one of which is a mirror, and of course they all are attributed with spiritual or magical attributes, force of some kind inherent to their very being, one of which is a sword alleged to have been used to Fight the Eight-Headed Dragon Yamato no Orochi by Susanoo Oh. It's part of the primordial origin myth of Japan, so to speak. But yeah, these chivalric orders, I mean, there's so many of them, and just pre-World War II thoughts and ideas were getting pretty strange. So I don't know, there may be something there, but once again, this is all purely flights of fancy on my part. You've also got the whole, I want to say roughly like century and a half of the use of Onmyoto spiritualism, which I've discussed in other episodes on Abe no Seimei, who is basically the Japanese equivalent of Merlin. But in the 1980s, after the release of a specific book called Teito Monogatari, aka Doomed Megalopolis, or at least that's the anime adaptation of the book. But this book was responsible for a 1980s era occult boom, so to speak, that really like repopularized occultism, especially through Onmyoto, which was a syncretism of Buddhism, Shinto, Taoism. It relied heavily on what would today be widely recognized as Feng Shui, but as more of a cosmic force of when and where. It's not just like how to place your furniture, etc., but how energies flow and connections to earth mysteries, etc., geomagnetic ley lines, dragon lines, etc., things of this nature, how spirits travel from one spot to another, etc. I wanted to get to, I just wanted to cover a few incidents of unusual Japanese abduction, UFO or alien abduction or contactee accounts that differ significantly from typical Western narratives. Now, these aren't necessarily connected with crime, but I wanted to include these to show a sort of cultural difference in how these incidents are approached or viewed from the Japanese point of view. Now, you've got an individual by the name of Yoshihiro Fujiwara in Katami, Hokkaido, of April 1974. This is one of the more bizarre Japanese abduction cases. Fujiwara was a farmer who encountered a 3-foot-tall octopus/starfish-like creature in a transparent suit who would emit electric hums from a helmet and use telepathic communication. Fujiwara was lifted into an orange-lit disc, for lack of a better term, which transported him to space, where he orbited the Earth, the Moon, and later Jupiter and Saturn's moon Titan. He developed an automatic writing style, largely centering around hieroglyphs of some sort. I hesitate to use the term hieroglyphs, but very unique, self-made symbols, etc. He also claimed to have telekinetic powers, as well as an identity as Earth's representative of the Summon Call Space Union, which was a organization quite similar to many of the galactic federations you see or hear of in much of the modern day contactee or abductee or experiencer literature and discourse. But his role as a representative of the Summon Call Space Union was linked to averting certain disasters. The craft environment is described as intelligent and alive. So this UFO, quote unquote, that he was taken aboard was some kind of organism in itself too, which mirrors strange sort of adjacent to Trevor James Constable-like concepts. He later produced daily psychic messages commanding ritual pilgrimages as a part of a spiritual cosmic mission of some sort. This narrative features space travel ritual language, symbolic channeling, and a cosmic mission identity, more akin to shamanic or spiritualist myth than standard abduction tropes. Now, a lot of abductees or experiencers, whichever term you prefer, a lot of them are sort of, I guess, sort of like conscripted, I guess, for lack of a better term, into some sort of mission. They are given, some level of galactic importance, basically. Like, they're not just some schmuck who was working at 1-800 Got Junk. Now they have a cosmic/divine mission because the aliens told them so. A more structured translation of Fujiwara's telepathic messages, these so-called space glyphs, were produced after his April 1974 encounters in Katami, Hokkaido. Shortly after his initial abduction, Fujiwara reported sharp pains in his ears and fingertips, triggering automatic writing of strange, unintelligible symbols on paper. These symbols reportedly formed a cosmic script or quote-unquote space language, accompanied by telepathic commands instructing him to go to a specific mountain where further encounters occurred. Fujiwara described them as hieroglyphic-like characters, vaguely resembling Japanese kana, but arranged in unfamiliar patterns alongside geometric map-like shapes. The glyphs often appeared with diagrammatic circles and lines, possibly indicating star systems, spacecraft pathing, or ritual points. While Fujiwara never provided literal translations, researchers have recorded paraphrased commands as, quote, "When the craft lands on the mountain, you will come by yourself," unquote. This is interpreted as meeting instructions or to return to Mount Nikoro, I believe it was, for another rendezvous with the space people, the octopus/starfish aliens. Also, very interesting. Anytime it's an octopus, starfish, whatever, I'm into it. Space cephalopods, I'm down. The context suggests he became sort of a spokesperson for an organization previously mentioned called the Summon Call Space Union, or SAMCALL, as depicted in his glyph sessions. Fujiwara later stated the glyphs conveyed his cosmic role. Quote, "I can teleport to a star 250 million light years away in 6 minutes. My role is delaying natural disasters like earthquakes and eruptions," unquote. This psychic message is believed to have originated directly via the writings. He also asserts that the glyphic messages granted him psionic or psychic abilities such as telekinesis, teleportation, and precognition, forming the basis of his identity as Earth's cosmic intermediary. These glyphs, so to speak, these symbols that he's downloaded into his brain, allegedly, they blend Japanese writing aesthetics with cosmic geometry, a sort of shamanic symbolism hybridized with UFO ideology. There's a mystical component to these glyphs. They're accompanied by psychic visions, as well as hearing commands, clairaudience of some kind, and physical sensations, not standard abduction recall. He isn't bringing all this back to mind through hypnosis, which I have stated before, a very dubious, it's dubious. Cosmic role and identity. Fujiwara internalized these glyphs messages, viewing himself as Earth's emissary tasked with preventing disasters, whether these be natural disasters, cosmic disasters, etc. He has been deputized, so to speak, by non-human intelligences. Okay. I don't know why, but anyone throughout history who's been deputized by non-human intelligences, for better or worse, they're probably going to either amount to nothing, or they're going to cause some serious, some serious changes in the time-space archival recognition of history as it progressed. Fujiwara's experiences have been documented in multiple UFO archives and case reports, including Albert Rosales' compilations of the humanoid encounters. Awesome series. If you can get your hands on it, do. Man, that is a endlessly just fantastic read. As well as books by Kenichi Arai, his research notebooks. Though full transcripts of these glyphs do remain unpublished. Most of the glyph material comes from secondary retellings and limited press mentions rather than full photographed examples. I do believe, though, if you want to check some out, you can just Google image search. There's a good handful, I believe. Another sort of, let's say, cultural touchstone that's long been part of Japanese mysticism or occult thought, etc., is something called Kudan, which is a human-headed beast entity. Folklorist records include several reports during World War II of Kudan births, people born part human, part beast. These sprouted essentially prophecies. It's kind of like there's a precedent throughout at least Western culture of deformed or monstrous births, etc., as having inherent prophetic meaning in themselves. However, I believe in what some of these World War II era incidents of Kudan, these human-headed beast entities being born, that the entities themselves allegedly were supposed to have spouted prophecy largely before dying. Most of these things don't live very long. But there is precedent throughout Western and Eastern culture of these weird human-animal hybrids being born. Supposedly, they don't live very long. I don't know. I think it's just largely just deformities and teratoma type stuff happening, but they are inherently imbued with certain divinatory meaning. Like they're seen as omens, essentially. There were a few that occurred towards the end of the war in spring of 1945. These occurred in towns like Iwakuni and Kobe in 1943 to 1945. Fukurai Tomokichi, 1869 to 1952, the man who was largely involved with the basis behind the Ringu story. He was an assistant professor at Tokyo Imperial University. He's a pioneer of scientific mesmerism, aka Simon Jutsu. He conducted early hypnosis experiments and psychical research in the early 1900s and was famous for documenting thoughtography, or ninja, using mediums like Nagai Kiku and Mifune Chizuko, or Chizuko Mifune, who we did a previous episode on way back in the day when we first started out and didn't know what the fuck we were doing. Still don't, to a large degree. His work garnered international attention but ended in scandal, and later became referred to as the Fukurai Affair, basically forever just dragging his name through the mud. This led to his forced departure in 1913 and the marginalization of parapsychology and Japanese clinical psychology for decades. It was basically this whole incident is what largely discredited parapsychology in the eyes of quote-unquote modern Japanese society from this point on. You see a sort of, I won't say correction, but you see a fixing of this in post-World War II era. Another figure is Asano Wasaburo, a graduate of Tokyo Imperial University and translator of Shakespeare. Asano became the key promoter of Shinto-focused spiritual research. He founded the Shinrei Kagaku Kenkyukai, or the Society for Scientific Research on Psychic Phenomena, in 1922. He published works like Two Mysterious Spiritual Phenomena and wrote about Shinto spiritualism through psychic lenses. Asano associated the Omoto-kyo group and drew in spiritual politicians and military personnel for events such as Shinkan Kishin, a spirit possession ritual, until it was banned in 1923. However, this Shinkan ritual of spirit possession became a large, fundamental, let's say, cornerstone of a lot of the Shūkyō, or new religious movements that popped up during World War II and beyond. Let's see, who else? We've got the Shinrei Kagaku Kenkyukai, the Japanese Society for Psychical Research, mentioned several times previously. Active largely from the 1920s to 30s, the SSRP held lectures, seances, and discussions in psychic matters, attracting both spiritualists and the intelligentsia. Membership claimed over 3,000 circa 1928. Although not officially militarized, its work overlapped with nationalist agendas. Many of its participants or followers later founded religious or spiritual movements of their own, with political overtones, including Omoto, Mahikari, and others with imperialistic or pan-Asian outlooks. Omoto-kyo, whose leader, Deguchi Onisaburo, practiced Shinkan Kishin, the spirit possession ritual, drew interest from the military. its leadership, including Asano, were in contact with right-wing figures and naval officers like Yutaro Yano, the founder of the theocratic Shinsei Ryujinkai in 1934. Though Japan did not have an official paranormal division like the Ononurbe, the National Spiritual Mobilization Movement from 1937 to 1945 shows the broader wartime structure that subsumed many nationalist and spiritualist organizations into state policy, promoting ideological unity and mobilization around spiritually coded wartime ethics. Closest we're going to get to a Japanese X-Files, at least in this era, that's publicly known of, at least. While Japan did not replicate Nazi-style occult espionage agencies, the early 20th century psychic research movement in Japan deeply intersected with spiritual nationalism, Shinto revivalism, and wartime ideology. Scientists like Fukurai and intellectuals like Asano played pivotal roles in bridging Western parapsychology with indigenous spiritual traditions, often with subtle overlap into political and military spheres, sometimes not so subtle. Several Japanese spiritualist groups, proto-UFO religions, and new religious movements engaged in channeling or automatic writing of blueprints for spirit technologies, quote-unquote, similar to the etheric engineering concepts of Meade Lane's Borderland Sciences Research Foundation. The practice appeared most strongly among groups influenced by a mixture of Omoto-kyo, theosophy, Japanese esoteric Buddhism or Shingon, spiritism or psychical research, and later, contactee-era UFO cosmologies. Notable cases and movements that featured such quote-unquote channel technologies include Omoto-kyo, as led by Onisaburo Doguchi. Onisaburo Doguchi, 1871 to 1948, described heavenly realms where spiritual machines and divine technologies were used. Some of his automatic writings and drawings depict celestial airships, healing devices, and energy transfer mechanisms, allegedly used by gods to prepare the earth for purification. Omoto-kyo also prophesied the return of divine rule through aerial vehicles from the high plane of heaven, quote-unquote, high plane of heaven, a.k.a. Takamagahara. I think I got that right. A parallel to later UFO beliefs. There are illustrations and spirit diagrams archived in the Omoto-kyo library resembling energy conduction towers, etheric turbines, or cosmic radios, interpreted as interdimensional receivers or kami communication devices. There's also Genshi Shinwa Kai, the Primordial Myth Society, a fringe Shinto/occult circle active in the 1930s. They produced channeled, quote-unquote, reconstructions of Atlantean and Lemurian technologies, claiming these were preserved in the Japanese spiritual bloodline. Members believed they were reincarnated Atlantean priests, heard that one before, and channeled mechanical diagrams of devices capable of accessing the quote-unquote hollow earth, Shambhala, Agartha, etc., or summoning celestial chariots, quote-unquote. There's the Japanese Flying Saucer Research Association, active from the 1950s to 60s. While officially a civilian UFO research group, some members were affiliated with Omoto-kyo and GLA, and explored channeling as a means of receiving cosmic engineering instructions. Reports in their newsletters claimed that alien entities had seeded knowledge of anti-gravity propulsion and ether energy collection mechanisms in the minds of sensitives. There's the GLA/Takahashi Keiko and the Great Spirit of the Cosmos group. Founded in the 1960s, GLA became known for spiritual counseling and cosmic prophecy. Takahashi and others channeled diagrams for energy healing devices and spirit tech designed to harmonize the soul with the cosmos, including quote-unquote cosmic mirrors, quote-unquote vibrational alignment discs, and quote-unquote ancestral karma modulation fields, etc. Then you have Asano Wasaburo's psychic science. While not a full UFO cult, Asano, active from the 1910s to 30s, combined Western psychical research with Japanese spiritual cosmology. He and his students attempted to document blueprints from the spirit world, especially for mind transmission devices, aka telepathic technology. Machines to measure and visualize thought waves, devices for remote spiritual healing and soul relocation, etc. You've got several minor contactee groups in post-war Japan as well. Some contactee-influenced cults that blended spiritualism with ufology and claimed that Space Brothers, quote-unquote, revealed energy devices to bring harmony to Earth, including solar harmonizers to prevent earthquakes. Don't quite see how that works, but hey, science. Dimensional gates powered by chanting and copper spirals, ether batteries that stored cosmic love vibrations, etc. In these cases, the quote-unquote blueprints were never constructed in full, but sketches, ritual diagrams, and construction instructions were published in obscure magazines and group newsletters. There's evidence that various Japanese government and military factions showed interest in these quote-unquote channeled spirit technology blueprints and related esoteric technological concepts, especially during the 1930s through the early post-war period. A brief overview of how that interest manifested. So, the Imperial Japanese military and ultranationalist circles. Some military officers and ultranationalists were fascinated by spiritual technologies believed to offer strategic advances, especially in communications, healing, and possibly advanced propulsion. Documents from the Imperial Army's intelligence units reference monitoring fringe spiritual groups like Omoto-kyo and Tachikawa Ryu offshoots that claimed access to etheric energy devices or celestial vehicles. There was anecdotal evidence of small-scale experiments or investigations into quote-unquote spirit radios or psychic communication devices, possibly inspired by blueprints from channeled sources. There was research done under the Ministry of Education and Scientific Bureaus. The Japanese Ministry of Education, through university research labs linked to psychical research and spiritual studies, occasionally received unofficial funding to explore parapsychology and quote-unquote subtle energy phenomenon. Some archives show bureaucratic interest in how channeled diagrams might relate to energy harnessing or novel technology, though no formal program or spirit tech, quote-unquote, was publicly acknowledged. At the same time, the military and police authorities also surveilled and sometimes repressed groups whose spiritual tech claims were seen as potentially destabilizing or heretical, unorthodox groups, so to speak. Although all of this is pretty unorthodox. Official records describe crackdowns on quote-unquote dangerous cults who propagated unapproved esoteric science or claimed to possess technologies threatening orthodox state Shinto ideology. Post-war U.S. occupation monitoring by the General Headquarters, or GHQ, of Allied Occupation Forces was wary of continued spiritualist research tied to nationalist or occult technologies. Declassified U.S. intelligence files reveal that GHQ monitored or restricted organizations like Omoto-kyo, partly due to concerns over esoteric doctrines mingling with ultranationalist sympathies. There are also mentions of confiscation of channeled manuscripts and technological diagrams that could have been linked to hidden military programs. While no publicly verified project built a functioning quote-unquote spirit technology from these blueprints, the interest was real, both for potential secret technology applications and due to the political/religious power these groups wielded. Their esoteric knowledge and quote-unquote blueprints were treated as a possible intelligence asset or threat by the military and later occupation authorities. A curated list of classified documents, police files, and military memos that reference Japanese government or military interest in spiritualist groups and their quote-unquote channeled spirit technology from roughly the 1920s to post-World War II occupation era includes Imperial Japanese Military Intelligence Files of Omoto-kyo Surveillance, 1953 to 1954, archived in the National Institute for Defense Studies, Tokyo, classified files released in 2003, reports on Omoto-kyo leadership and ritual activities, notes on automatic writing sessions describing quote-unquote heavenly vehicles and energy devices, assessment of possible applications for military communication or troop morale, reference NIDS file number JPN-MIL-Omoto-1935-44. Military surveillance reports detail that Omoto-kyo's leadership engaged in ritual sessions where automatic writing produced diagrams and descriptions of quote-unquote heavenly vehicles capable of traversing spiritual and physical realms. An officer's note from 1938 reads, quote, "The Sect's records describe light vessels powered by celestial energy, which may inspire novel communication devices if interpreted scientifically," unquote. However, the report also warns of Omoto-kyo's potential to sway troop morale through esoteric teaching, suggesting cautious interest balanced by wariness for subversion. There's also the Tokubetsu Koto Kaisatsu, or Special Hire Police Memo, concerning Tachikawa Ryu and allied esoteric groups circa 1938, archived in the National Archives of Japan in Tokyo. Surveillance of Tachikawa Ryu revivalists channeling quote-unquote etheric blueprints for ritual tools, concerns about destabilizing elements in nationalist spiritualist circles, recommendations for suppression and interrogation records, and reference police file number Toku-1938-Tachikawa. Police files reveal active suppression efforts against Tachikawa Ryu, revivalists distributing etheric blueprints for ritual artifacts said to manipulate spiritual energies. Interrogation transcripts from detained membership include claims such as, quote, "These blueprints contain the sacred geometry necessary to harness the flow of divine essence for protection and power," unquote. The documents underscore fears that such orthodox spiritual power could undermine state Shinto orthodoxy and national unity. Now, for those who don't remember, Tachikawa Ryu revivalists, the Tachikawa Ryu tantric belief system, for lack of a better term, was the one that was all badass and metal and involved like skulls and blood and shit. So very, very, very anime supervillain type shit going on, type vibes. There's the Ministry of Educational Internal Correspondence, Psychical Research and Scientific Studies, 1930 to 1940, archived in the Ministry of Education Archives, Tokyo. Funding proposals for parapsychology research involving spirit communication devices. Reports referencing Asano Wasaburo's laboratory and experiments in quote-unquote mind wave visualization. Cautionary notes on maintaining ideological control over research, and reference number MOE file number EDU-Psych-1930s. Correspondence among ministry officials indicates provisional support for parapsychology labs exploring mind wave visualization and spirit communication devices, often framed as advancing Japanese scientific prowess. One memo reads, quote, "While ensuring ideological conformity, we encourage exploration of hidden energies that may augment our understanding of nature and psychology," unquote. The archives include reference to Asano Wasaburo's experiments, though they caution against excessive public exposure that might fuel superstition. There's also the Imperial Japanese Army Medical Corps report, quote, "Psychic Phenomena and Battlefield Potential," unquote, 1943. This is in the Japan Defense Ministry archives. Investigation into psychic healing and mind control in soldiers. Review of spiritual healing methods from sects like Omoto-kyo and Genshi Shinwa Kai. Mention of quote-unquote ether energy concepts linked to ritual objects. Reference Defense Report number ARM-MED-Psych-1943. This military medical evaluation explores the possibility of using psychic healing and mind control techniques in soldiers, referencing ritual methods from groups like Omoto-kyo and Genshi Shinwa Kai. A passage states, quote, "Preliminary findings suggest that ritual objects imbued with ether energy may aid recovery and resilience, warranting further investigation," unquote. The report suggests blending spiritual healing with modern medicine to enhance troop effectiveness. Then you've got the U.S. Occupation GHQ intelligence summaries on Omoto-kyo and spiritualist groups, 1946 to 1952. This is in the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, of the USA. Declassified documents released in the 1990s. Monitoring reports on Omoto-kyo's continued spiritual activities and influence. Seizure of ritual manuscripts and channeled technical drawings, analysis of links between spiritual groups and ultra-nationalist remnants. Reference is NARA RG331 Box 46 Folder Omoto Surveillance 1946 to 52. These are post-war GHQ documents monitoring Omoto Kiyo's continued spiritual influence, noting, quote, despite official bans, the sect circulates manuscripts describing channeled technologies, mechanisms alleged to bridge cosmic and earthly realms, unquote. Seized documents include ritual scrolls with technical drawings reminiscent of wartime spirit tech blueprints, raising allied concerns about nationalist occultism's persistence. You've got police interrogation transcript, seizure of spirit blueprint scrolls from Ginshi Shinwakai member, 1940, archived in the Metropolitan Police Historical Records of Tokyo. Confession and description for blueprints for quote-unquote celestial chariots. Discussion of alleged ritual uses for, quote, energy harnessing machines, unquote. Evidence of underground printing of esoteric materials. And reference number MPD file number GS-KAI-1940-INT. An interrogation record reveals a sect member describing, quote, these scrolls illustrate celestial chariots powered by sacred geometry and energy flows designed to transport spirit and matter, unquote. The suspect claimed underground printing was underway to distribute these plans among believers. The file reflects intense police efforts to curb dissemination of what was deemed dangerous esoteric knowledge. Then you got a corporate intelligence report, Japan Flying Saucer Research Association Connections, 1957, archived in the Japan Ministry of International Trade and Industry, or MITI archives. Investigation into UFO groups' claims of, quote, channeled cosmic technologies, unquote. Economic risks posed by fraud and superstition of emerging tech sectors, surveillance of potential communist infiltration under the guise of spiritualism, reference number MITI file number UFO-JPN-1957. This MITI report examines UFO group claims of receiving, quote, cosmic technologies, unquote, through channeling, noting economic and ideological concerns. One of the quotes from this file says, quote, the fusion of pseudoscience and spirituality in these groups poses risk of fraud and may be exploited by subversive elements seeking to destabilize emerging industries, unquote. The document highlights government vigilance over how new religious movements intertwined with proto-scientific rhetoric during Japan's post-war industrial boom. There is a definite esoteric and quasi-occult underpinning to kamikaze ideology, especially in its formative stages during the late imperial period. While often portrayed as purely nationalist or militarist phenomenon, kamikaze belief and practices were deeply informed by Shinto mysticism, ancestral veneration, and death cult themes. Fucking death cult themes! State Shinto and the cult of the emperor, specifically. Kamikaze pilots were spiritually primed to see themselves not just as soldiers, but as living offerings, or kinshi, to the divine emperor, a god-descended being. They themselves were the burnt sacrifice to their divine overlord. The Yasukuni shrine system helped sanctify fallen soldiers as kami, or spirits, ensuring they would join Japan's pantheon of protective war dead. This wasn't metaphorical either. Pilots were told they would literally become guardian spirits who could aid Japan from the other world. There's the myth of the divine wind. The kamikaze, the word itself, refers to divine winds that protect Japan from the Mongol invaders in the 13th century. This myth was explicitly invoked by military commanders and spiritual advisors to frame suicide missions as the modern resurgence of supernatural national defense. Zen Buddhism and the erasure of self was another core concept that helped lend itself to the committal of such acts. Zen training was popular among certain kamikaze units, especially the elite ones, quote-unquote elite, because its doctrine of egolessness and immediate acceptance of death aligned with military objectives. There's evidence of officers using Zen koans, which are essentially like mind-expanding riddles, like short sayings that are meant to initiate some form of Zen consciousness within the mind. The Zen koans and meditative training to prepare pilots for self-sacrifice with emotional detachment and discipline. So they basically were just repeating these mantras, essentially, that put them in the mind state to do what they did. Some pilots were even encouraged to write death poems, or jisei, and meditate calmly just before launching. While not part of mainstream military training, there's evidence that Shinkan and Reikon believe the Shinkan Kishin spirit possession ritual, the practice of pacifying or summoning spirits, played a subtle role. Some war propagandists claimed the spirits of past warriors, i.e. Saigo Takamori, a legendary samurai, as well as other legendary samurai, would guide the kamikaze in their flights. The kamikaze themselves were seen as yurei, restless, heroic spirits in waiting, often photographed or described with funeral or ghostly overtones, emphasizing spiritual transformation. Omoto Kiyo's early ultranationalist esoteric theology, with its emphasis on Japan's spiritual destiny, bled into parts of the intellectual environment that shaped kamikaze ideology. And while Omoto Kiyo as an organization was suppressed during the war, former Omoto Kiyo followers and sympathizers remained active in the ideological and spiritual education of military cadets. Some kamikaze pilots reportedly carried protective amulets, or ofuda, from shrines, or were given personal blessings by militarized priests. Rumors exist, unconfirmed in official records, of Onmyoji-style rituals or pre-flight spiritual purifications, particularly at air bases in Kyushu and the Ryukyu Islands. An excerpt from one kamikaze's letter in 1945 says, quote, "My body will shatter, but my spirit shall live on. I will become a protector of the homeland and soar above in the sky of eternity." Unquote. Kamikaze ideology wasn't purely nationalistic or utilitarian. It was infused with Shinto spiritualism, ancestral cult belief, Zen death practices, and esoteric notions of spiritual elevation through sacrifice. The military carefully weaponized these mystical concepts to sustain morale and create a metaphysical justification for suicide warfare. Exactly what I'm talking about. And this still exists to this day, not in this specific case, but we have certain people in the world who, I don't know, can't wait to get to Allah, or what have you. I don't know, just the prevalence of mass shootings followed by suicide by cop or suicide by self. I don't know. There's this prevalence of a mind frame that thinks that they're going to be sainted for some reason. I don't know. It's world's fucked up. Anyways, so I'm gonna leave you guys with one last instance of ritual murder as propagated by occult beliefs. This is a more modern example. This is the drumstick killer case. Sachiko Ito, born August 21st, 1947, executed September 27th, 2012. This occurred in the Sukagawa City, Fukushima Prefecture. After moving to Gifu following her husband's disappearance in 1992, Eto became involved with a religious faith healing group tied to a Shinto-influenced healing practice, often referred to as Ogamiya-san. When expelled from that group, she founded her own healing cult, positioning herself as a psychic, a faith healer, and eventually as a deity-like figure. Well, it didn't take long to transition from one to the other, does it? The murders occurred between December 1994 and June 1995. Eto and her inner circle, including her daughter Yuko, 23, Hiroshi Nemoto, 21, and Mitsuo Sekine, 45, carried out ritualistic beatings using taiko drumsticks, claiming they were quote-unquote exorcising demons or quote-unquote ugly devils. In total, they murdered 6 cult members and severely injured another. The victims included both male and female cult members and family members of followers. The bodies were found decomposing inside Eto's home, indicating months of concealment. A surviving victim who was hospitalized after one of the assaults alerted police, leading to the discovery of the deceased and Eto's arrest, which occurred on July 5th, 1995. The surviving cult members received a criminal sentence of 3 years with a 5-year suspension in March 1997. In 2001, court proceedings called for a death sentence for Eto. life imprisonment for Yuko and Sakine, and 20 years, later reduced to 18. Good job. For Nemoto. All appeals were dismissed. Ito's sentence was upheld by Japan's Supreme Court in 2008. Ito was executed by hanging on September 27, 2012, the first female execution in Japan in 15 years. Ito was portrayed by the media as a cult leader and is called, quote-unquote, drumstick killer. Her self-identification as a divine figure, claims of psychic powers, and justification that the beaten cult members were possessed underpin the horrific nature of her crimes. Observers compare her trial to that of Shinrikyo, which is just, at this point, fucking unavoidable, noting similarities in cultic psychology and exorcism framed as ritual murder. I've got a lot of sources for this series. I'm going to try to fit them all in the show notes, but goddamn, there's so many. So, I don't know. If anyone's interested or wants to know, I'm going to keep the notes handy, just in case. But yeah, I'm going to fit what I can in the show notes. But yeah, that's the drumstick killer case. You know, that's in the 90s. So that's just to show that, you know, these still happen. This is still happening. You know, it's how beliefs use us. It's almost as if we are the host to potentially parasitic ideas. And I hesitate to frame all of this as in that the ideas are sentient, but just because I hesitate doesn't mean I don't necessarily not believe that. I don't know. I think there's I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to put it, but, you know, sometimes ideas, concepts, beliefs, they have a habit of getting away from us, snowballing, and picking up dust on their way down, and becoming bigger, more unwieldy, and taking on a life of their own. And it's one of the underlying ideas behind a lot of what I like to explore in here, specifically on these occult crime atlas things, is how beliefs will push us into doing something that once upon a time was probably entirely contrary to our nature, or so we believed. So, yeah. My voice is giving out. So that means that's the end of this episode. I appreciate you guys once again. Goddamn, just so much. I love you guys. Thanks for being interested in what I'm interested in. I thought I was a freak, weirdo, just kooky son of a bitch. I mean, I know I am, but it's nice to know I'm not the only one. So, once again, love you guys. Thank you for all your listens, your likes, your comments. I love hearing from you guys. It's fucking awesome. So yeah, keep it up and be back hopefully next week, I believe, should everything go right. We're gonna have one more episode of Occult Crime Atlas that's gonna lead into a bigger series on the Russian and Chinese equivalents to all of America's psychic warfare, i.e., you know, the Russian and Chinese equivalents of Project Stargates, you know, the Monroe Institute, things like this, of this nature, and how we know all about America stuff. It's all over the place, but Russia and China, psychotronics, you know, weaponized Qigong practices, etc. More child psychic soldiers. You know, we don't hear a lot about this stuff, and I'm going to get into the thick of it in the next few weeks here. So, yeah. My name is Mike Lucht. This is the Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast podcast. Once again, thank you for listening. Love you guys. See you next time.